Well, Florida military veterans will be telling their personal stories through dramatic performances on stage in the Tampa Bay area beginning tomorrow night in St. Petersburg. It's an effort to help deepen understanding of their experiences. The group includes 6 veterans and 1 military spouse. The cast members will talk about how and why they served, their experiences overseas, the injuries and challenges that they've had to overcome, and how they're transitioning back into civilian life. It's part of the National Telling Project. Here's a video trailer which gives us an overview of the project.
Mark time, march!
These performances do something on stage that I've never seen anything else do.
This is a great story I want to tell you.
Act 1, prologue.
Boom! And then everything goes black.
I hear my gunner screaming, look back, he's missing his legs.
Mama, can't you see? Mama, can't you see?
He came up and raped me. And that eats away at me a lot because I'm trained to fight.
Put the armies up to me.
Don't you have any male children? She said, yes, but you killed all of them.
I told them I wanted to be a Marine.
I think it showed me what matters in life and what doesn't really matter in life.
I felt like I was absolutely worthless.
God forbid they come home and they're not the same.
Act 2.
No regrets.
Well, that's a video trailer that just tells us about what's going to happen tomorrow night at the Tampa Bay premiere of the Telling Project. And 2 members of the project are here. Taylor Urruela is a former Army infantryman who served from 2004 to 2011, including service in Iraq, where he was wounded by 2 roadside bombs, resulting in the loss of one of his legs below the knee. After 4 years of rehab, he transitioned into civilian life and encountered issues with veterans' health care and PTSD. He's now a Tampa resident, and he co-founded the nonprofit VetSports to encourage injured veterans to participate in sports. He's begun a career as a personal trainer and a model, and is writing a novel. And Taylor, welcome to WMNF. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And Lisa Powers is director for The Telling, the Tampa Bay stage productions. Lisa has worked extensively as a theater professional, a drama therapist, and an educator. And she's well known here in the Tampa Bay area for her work as an actor and a former artistic director at American Stage. She's also worked as director of the Florida Humanity Council's Dreamers and Schemers historical stage productions around the state. And Lisa, welcome to WMNF. Good to see you.
Thanks, Rob. Good to see you,
Tell us more about the idea for the Telling Project, Lisa.
So the Florida Humanities Council wanted to do something to engage local veterans and the civilian population. And I spoke with Janine Farver, and we came upon the Telling Project, which is a national project that goes into cities all over the United States. I think they've had 25 performances. They've been doing it since 2008.
I should say she's the director of the Florida Humanities Council, also my wife, by the way, too. So go ahead.
So that's how we got on this show. No, I'm just kidding. Yes. So we looked into the Telling Project, and we got in touch with Johnathan Wei, who is the founder of the Telling Project, and connected with him. And what happened is he comes to town for about 4 days. He interviews veterans about 2 hours for each interview. And from those interviews, he goes back and he extracts verbatim what was said and sort of edits it into a script for performance. And then I've worked with the veterans for Telling Tampa Bay performance for about 6 weeks.
So the performance that gets underway tomorrow night is all based on local veterans' experiences?
Local veterans' experiences, and it's verbatim. It's their story in their words.
Why is it important to tell these stories?
I think that it's important because I think we've lost a sense of our responsibility for reintegrating combat soldiers, all soldiers, back into the civilian population. I think there's a huge disconnect between soldiers and people who have only 1% of the population goes and serves now. And I think that when they come back, and just from listening to these few veterans that I've worked with, I don't think anyone really takes into account or even knows that they served. And, back in the times of the ancient Greeks, it used to be, that's what they used to do. If there was a war, the combat soldiers would come back, the whole town would gather around, they would tell their stories so that everyone sort of shared the burden of what these people went through and then welcomed them home. It was like a ritualized reintegration. And I think we've really lost that. And I really feel like Telling Tampa Bay and the Telling Project, as a whole, is really trying to bring that back.
And Taylor, you served in the infantry. Did you feel that way? Did you feel disconnected from the civilian population when you came back?
Oh, very much so. It's one of the things I struggled with the most. And it's not that they don't care to learn. It's just that there's not a lot of resources out there for them to learn about our experiences and to kind of understand what we're going through. I had a really difficult 2-year transition process. And that's part of the issue, was the fact that I didn't feel like a lot of people understood what I was going through. And in the community that I was in, there weren't a lot of other veterans or combat veterans who I could talk to, who I could relate with. And so, yeah, it's very important that we do things like this to express kind of what we've been through without letting, kind of Hollywood dictate, what it is.
Were you from Tampa originally?
No, I'm from Missouri originally. Mm-hmm. I transitioned to West Virginia for a year, had a really difficult time up there, didn't know anybody, and ended up moving down to Tampa 3 years ago. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And you served as an infantryman. You were in for more than 5 years.
Yep, 6.5 years.
6.5 years. Mm-hmm. And where did you serve?
I was in, Fort Benning, Georgia, infantry basic training. After that, I went to Germany, trained up for a year for deployment, and then we were stationed in Baghdad for a year. It was at the end of that year that I got injured and ended up rehabilitating for 4 years at Walter Reed before medically retiring.
Mm-hmm. And what was your motive for signing up for the military?
Kind of a lot of different things. I had a lot of family members in the service, pretty much the majority of them, several of them being combat veterans. So it had always been kind of in my head that I wanted to do that. Also had a very difficult kind of teen year times. I really needed that discipline and needed that structure and kind of that family atmosphere. And so by the time I hit 18, it was kind of no question in my mind.
And when you went overseas, what was your job? What did you do overseas?
Well, as an infantryman, you kind of do a bunch of different things. We did route clearance, looking for IEDs, potential IEDs. We did a lot of public relations missions, meeting with the Iraqi police, Iraqi leaders. And then just door-to-door, raids at times, big, massive company-wide raids. And kind of in the year that we were there, we did a lot of different things. I was also quick reaction force, so we responded to a lot of the, the gunfights and the IEDs and such.
And what was your sense of the war itself? I mean, what were your thoughts when you were over there about the mission that you were given and the assignments that you had?
Well, as a soldier, you accept whatever assignment they give you. As I say in the play, I joined initially for Afghanistan. When I joined, that was my idea of where I was going to go, what I was going to do. So getting the orders to Iraq was kind of eye-opening to me. It was a different war than what I had expected to go into. And at that time, 2006, it was very bad, very violent, and it was a very violent year there for us. So I accepted the mission. I did everything that they asked of me to do and didn't question it. But again, it was very eye-opening.
What was life like for you over there? I mean, was it how much downtime did you have? How much time were you out in the field?
Well, I mean, there's not a lot of downtime. Sometimes there is downtime. It's kind of it's very hectic with the quick reaction force being on that. You could get a call at a moment's notice. So you'd lay down after a 10-hour mission, getting ready for bed, and then one of your guys is hit. One of the vehicles is hit by an IED, and you got to respond to it. So they wake you up, you go out, and you don't know how much longer you're going to be out for. I can say we put a lot of hours in out there. We were out there quite a bit, sometimes stretches of 12 hours at a time. And downtime really just included, sitting around with the guys and just talking about home and, what we were going to do when we got back and stuff like that. But not a lot of downtime whatsoever.
Well, that's Taylor Urruela, who served as an Army infantryman from 2004 to 2011, 6.5 years, including service in Iraq. Also here is Lisa Powers, who is the director of the performance that gets underway tomorrow night. Lisa, tomorrow night's performance takes place at Studio 620?
Yes, Studio 620 at 7:30. And then we have, we're down in Sarasota at the Players Theater on March 6th, so Friday, again at 7:30. On March 13th and 14th, we're at HCC Studio Theater in Ybor City, again at 7:30. And Wednesday, April 1st, we're at Largo Cultural Center, again at 7:30. At the Players in Sarasota and at Largo Cultural Center, the doors will open at 6:30 because we're going to have sort of a type of expo, resource tables, and just all kinds of information for people to come in and, browse around and different organizations that are veteran supporting.
And our phone number is 813-239-9663. So tomorrow night is the premiere of the performances. Talk a little bit more. Besides Taylor, who else is in the cast?
We have Scott and Shannon Owens. Scott Owens and his wife Shannon. We were lucky enough to have a military spouse who agreed to be in the project, and they have a very wonderful and interesting story, and I think her voice is a really important voice to have on the stage. We have Jessica McVeigh. She was in the Marines. We have Michael Dunlap, who was also in the Marines, and he just received a house through Bank of America through their program of giving homes to veterans, and that was just a couple weeks ago, and just a wonderful event. And Ryan Simonson, he's from Sarasota, and Terry Davis also. So we have 3 people from Sarasota, Jessica, Ryan, and Terry. 3 from Clearwater Largo, and Taylor from Tampa.
So how much of the script is collaborative in the sense that the veterans, once they spoke and gave their initial stories and then saw them, the stories returned, how much did they change, if I could ask that, the story that they were given?
Well, I think it was a little, it's an unusual experience to not so much to tell your story. Of course, that takes a great bit of courage and vulnerability, but then to see it in print like a book or like someone else's story, but you're reading it and it's your story. I think that there's a shift that happens in there. There's a distancing that can be a little disconcerting. So we initially went through, the thes and the ands and the little changes, but then they were free to change whatever they wanted. So there were some bigger passages that maybe got added in and have to edit down other passages because we're trying to keep it to about 60 minutes because we're going to have post-discussion talkbacks and panels and Q&As and things. So we're keeping the performance down to 60 minutes. So there were quite a bit of changes on a few people's parts who felt like the story wasn't told the way they needed it. But then there came a time where we had to just, put the kibosh on that and say, that's it. We're sticking with what we have. So,
well, Taylor, you told your story to Johnathan Wei, and then he came back. He typed it up, printed it out, and gave it back to you in I imagine what he viewed as a dramatic form. Form that had maybe a rising action, just guessing. When you saw it, when it came back to you, what did you think of your version of the story? Was it right on, or did you have do you have changes that you wanted to make?
Well, as she was saying, it's verbatim, so it was as I told it, and as you tell your story, and especially as you tell it as much as I do, it kind of can change up, or you put words in where they shouldn't be. So more or less, what I had to change were just grammatical stuff. Get the right words in there, say how I really meant to say it instead of how it came across in the interview. So there weren't many changes. It was more or less just trying to tell it how it should have been told.
I imagine that when civilian life is just a guess. It's pretty genteel compared to what you experience in the field. Not just your own personal living situation, what happened to you, but also the way people interact in the military. I imagine that civilian life is a whole lot more genteel than what life is like out there when you're in the war in Iraq.
It's definitely vastly different. Yeah. Your interactions with each other are different. The experiences of those back here are different, and kind of the ability to relate can be very different. Yeah.
Do you ever have the feeling like you don't want to shock people by telling people the way it really was?
I used to, yeah. I didn't actually used to tell a lot of the details of my story, but I actually learned that the more details I'm able to give, the more I'm able to relate to to those that I'm telling. And it always opens up this far broader communication or ability to communicate with them because I'm open about it. And usually they'll share with me a story that they've been through, something that they've been through that can kind of help them relate to me a little bit. So I found that, most are appreciative of the fact that I can share the details of it, and like as I said, it usually opens up the doors to communication.
Well, again, our phone number 813-239-9663. Our email address is dj@wmnf.org. Taylor, I want to ask about losing the leg below your knee. Mm-hmm. Could you recount that day? What happened that day?
Yeah, we were 2 days from going home. We were doing a mission called Right Seat Ride. You take around the new unit, show them the area of operations, and that happens for about a week. And we're nearly done. We were actually taking them to the Baghdad Combat Sport Hospital. You have little mini hospitals there for whenever IEDs go off and you need emergency surgery. So we were actually headed there when we were hit by 2 roadside bombs. They tore through the vehicle, knocked us all out, and kind of woke up to just a flurry of activity inside the vehicle. Everybody was injured in the vehicle. One of my guys was dead. And then a helicopter, actually, it's kind of, I've had quite a few blessings in this entire situation. And a helicopter happened to be flying overhead and saw us get hit. So they came back around and picked us up. And before my sergeant even had his medical 9-line in to call it in. So we were very lucky that the helicopter was there and saw it happen. They ended up pulling us out and taking us to the combat sport hospital we were supposed to go anyways. Went through a bunch of different surgeries, a whole, travel to Washington, D.C. Eventually, it took about a week to get me there. And then about a week and a half after I got to Walter Reed, my femoral artery blew in my hospital bed. I initially had my leg completely intact. All the damage was to my right thigh. I lost 6 inches of my femur. My knee was dislocated. And actually, again, like I said, the little blessings, but my femoral artery was nicked when I initially got hit. But the heat from the shrapnel actually cauterized it on site. So they had kind of been prepared for my femoral artery to go. And it just so happened 5 a.m., October 31st, 2006, I'm laying in the bed and it just burst. Ended up having a doctor come in the room and he saved my life, held my femoral artery where the femoral meets the aorta. They rushed me into surgery. Ended up dying twice on the table, lost nearly all of my blood. I was very lucky to come out of that surgery alive. But it was a 14-hour surgery. The tourniquet was on for a very long time, and because of it, I had necrosis of most of the muscle in my lower limb. So it all had to be removed. So over the next 2 years, I fought to try to get some sort of use out of that limb, and through dozens of different surgeries and attempts to save it. And while it could have been saved, I would have been left with a pretty much useless limb. So it was at that point that I met with the doctors, and we decided to go ahead and amputate. So it's a long process.
If the helicopter hadn't been flying over your vehicle when the bomb exploded, what would have happened? I mean, if the delay to getting medical treatment had been longer, what would have happened to you? And how many people were in that vehicle when it was blown up?
Yeah, so we had 5 guys. One of our guys died immediately. I had my gunner who lost both of his legs. I had a dismount behind my commander who lost his leg above the knee. It was completely filleted. And then the guy behind me had extensive arm and leg damages, didn't lose anything, but very extensive. I can only guess what would have happened. I mean, we would have been out there easily for another 20 to 30 minutes at best, and that's if the chopper's on point.
And there's what they call the golden hour,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And what is the golden hour?
Well, I mean, that's that point where they need to get you into surgery and they need to get you, under the knife and make sure that they, attempts to save your life. We are extremely lucky to have the chopper there.
Did your vehicle have all the armor it should have had?
It had more than it should have had because we were carrying around the Commander. It had top of the line, and obviously we were battling what's called explosively formed projectiles, EFPs, and they're specifically made to eat through armor. It's a copper, and it melts and just completely cuts a hole through the armor. So we've got up armor, we've got all the latest technology, and I mean it just ate clean through it.
Mm-hmm. You've emerged from this, and two things strike me in your biography. One is that you emerged from this and you had PTSD. Mm-hmm. But the second is that you've gone into acting, you want to be a model, and you're a bodybuilder. You're a trainer, mm-hmm. You're a personal trainer. Let's start with PTSD. How long did you suffer, and are you still suffering from PTSD?
Yeah, so for me, that was kind of the interesting point of rehabilitation, is because when I got hurt, all the focus for me and from the doctors was on the injury, the physical injury. And obviously that's where it needs to be when you're rehabilitating from an injury. So so we went through that, and for 4 years I fought really hard to get myself back into shape and to get get as close to normal as I could. And then the other side of it is, at that point, you don't really want to accept that you have PTSD. You don't want to accept that you're thinking these thoughts, or that you're nervous when you're out in crowds. And so you kind of just tuck that away real deep. And that's the bad thing about PTSD, is that it'll just sit there laying dormant until it's ready to come out. And for me, it was through the transition. I transitioned to West Virginia University from the Army, and didn't really have a lot of support there. There was no other combat wounded veterans there, nobody that could really understand, and that's kind of where my PTSD came out. Things that I had, laying dormant for a while, and then they just exploded. And so for about 2 years, I battled with what I was going to do next, what my next goals would be, how I would recover from this. I didn't talk to anybody. I just kind of let it all, sit, and ended up, self-medicating, as a lot of veterans end up doing, and it was just a very bad time for me.
Was there a point where you finally reached a point where you were able to deal with it either with help or how did you make the transition?
To be candid, when you get to the point where you want to end it all, when you're ready to just let go and you're done fighting and you're ready to quit, that's kind of the eye opener. You fight through that, and then you realize, maybe I do need to go talk to people about this. For me, there's a great organization called Camaraderie Foundation. They pay for civilian psychiatric care for veterans. It's all free. They do this new form of therapy called art therapy, which is rapid eye movement type based therapy, and that was everything for me. It allowed me to understand that was just kind of a moment in my time, and that it shouldn't filter all my future experiences. So that was huge for me, and it allowed me to open up about my own story and to share it with others. And I'd say really when I started to come out of it was co-founding VetSports, helping other veterans who were dealing with exactly the same things I was. We would just get together and play sports, and you think it's just sports, but at the end of the day, you're relating and you're sharing stories, and you just feel like you're a part of a military unit again. And that's what I needed. I needed to be around those who had served and been there as well, so that I could kind of get this stuff off my chest and then hear their stories. I mean, my roommate now, my best friend, I met him through VetSports, and he got hit in the face with an IED, lost an eye, lost a row of teeth, and he's not missing a limb, but man, I can't even imagine what he's been through and his surgeries and his transition. And so it's just so motivating and uplifting to surround yourself with those who have been through worse, and to help others out. And it allows you to understand that there are people out there, both warriors and civilians, going through worse.
Did you ever try to talk to civilians at this point when you're up in West Virginia and after you had left the military? Did you find any civilians that were good to talk to, that helped you along the way, or was it almost impossible to talk to civilians?
Well, I didn't really set myself up well. Going to West Virginia wasn't a good idea for me. I didn't really think about, I wanted a fresh start, and that's all I could think about was fresh start. I want to get as far away from the military. I thought that would help, and it didn't. So no, I was not in the position there. I was in a college atmosphere, joined a fraternity, just trying to do the normal college stuff, and thinking that it would just push everything else away and I'd get past it, and that didn't happen. So it's not so much the civilian side of it, it's just more or less, putting yourself in the position and surrounding yourself with the right people. Mm-hmm. Now at this point I have many civilians that I'm close to, and that I share, these intimate moments with, and they shared their intimate moments with me, and so it's really helped.
Well, that's Tony Urruela, and Tony is one of the actors, I should say, or one of the performers, or one of the participants in the Telling Project, and it has its Bay Area premiere tomorrow night at Studio 620 in downtown St. Petersburg, and our phone number is 813-239-9663. Our email address is dj@wmnf.org. And also here's the director of the Telling Project, at least the local version, Lisa Powers is here. Taylor, I want to ask you, you want to be, this is pretty interesting, personal trainer, you're a model, and you're writing a novel. So your injury in Iraq didn't hold you back from doing any of this stuff?
Well, luckily, I've always had a passion for the gym. So even in my difficult moments, the gym was a place of solace for me. And, keeping motivated with that, keeping up with that allowed me to kind of get into these new endeavors in my life, which are all very new for me. And kind of it's opened my eyes to the fact that you keep fighting to get here in this place right now where I'm in a good mindset and I'm able to do these things that I'm passionate about and that I love.
Were you able to get back into the gym easily? Because the injuries were pretty severe.
Yeah, the reason why I laugh is because I remember this, on a regular basis because it makes me proud. But I would actually, as soon as I could go to the gym, I would ask my nurses, can I go? We have a gym on base on the medical grounds, the hospital grounds. And I remember wheeling myself. I've got, IVs hanging out of my arms and stuff, detached, but they're still hanging out. And I'm wheeling myself up this hill to go to the gym. And I'm in the gym in my wheelchair and I'm doing whatever workouts I could do. So, yeah, as soon as I could get back in the gym, I did. It was always, like I said, a place of solace for me, a place where I could just get away and forget, at least for that moment in time, what I was going through.
And you also, you want to be a model, or you are a model.
Yeah, I am actually on romance covers. I did a photo shoot in December, and it really it blew up, and I've got 5 romance covers this year, and writing my own novel as well, co-writing.
Pretty incredible. What advice would you give to somebody who's coming back from Afghanistan or Iraq and maybe facing some of the challenges that you face? What advice would you give them?
The number one top thing I would say is find a passion. You have to find something you're passionate about. If you have something you're passionate about, something that makes you want to get up the next day, even through the hardest moments, even when the depression's at its worst, that passion is still a light in your life. For a long time, I didn't have that, I didn't try. I didn't write, I didn't do, VetSports. I didn't go and just play sports and do these things that I love. I just kind of wanted to sulk, and that would be the biggest thing. The thing that helped me really get out of it was finding new passion and it gives you a new lease on life.
Lisa, just hearing this makes me think that we don't create spaces for veterans to get together and kind of. I remember talking with Vietnam veterans after Vietnam, and we had the Vet Counseling Center on Bush Boulevard where people could come several times a week and just kind of sit around in a group and talk about this. And I think that helped returning Vietnam vets kind of get through that transition. But do we have anything like that here in the U.S. today?
Well, I think that it's very fragmented, and I think you really have to look for it. I know that when I was doing a little bit of research, there's in Tampa, there's the Vet Therapy Center that's over it's on the USF campus, and they have groups and things, and it's kind of a center, like a day program center. But I didn't see very many young veterans there, and I asked about that, and the therapist there told me that they're just not ready. They don't come in because they're not ready. And because I said, where can I find some young vets too? Not that we were just getting in our submissions a lot of people from Vietnam. We got a couple of like World War II veterans and things like that. But I wanted to hear from the current wars. So that saddened me to hear, but I understand it. Because they just weren't admitting. I think it's too. It takes a while, as Taylor so eloquently put it. It takes a while for someone to get to the point where they admit that they need some help. And it's very interesting from the therapist's point of view when I'm working with these guys, even though I'm not really doing that. That's not my role there. But I always have that little voice in my head. And you can see so many of these guys have gone through some therapy. They would have to be able to get up there and tell their stories this way. And that's why they're doing it. When I ask anyone why they're doing it, any of these veterans say they're doing it because they want people to know, what it's like and what their story is. It's a selfless act in a way because, in terms of acting, it's really easy to get up there and be someone else. It's really, and as an actor myself, I love that because I'm like, I'm leaving myself for a while and all my troubles, and I'm going to be, Susie, and do all that fun stuff and then come back. But these guys are being themselves and telling some stories that are not easy to tell. It's very clear to me who has done some extensive work to get to the place where they can tell. And it's just hard. It's very vulnerable. They have a great amount of courage to get up there and do this, and it's a selfless act on their part.
The Telling Project's been going on since 2008. I wonder, when people have come to the previous Telling Project events around the country, I wonder, is it mostly veterans and their families, or is it the civilian population that was never in the military? Or
I think it's very mixed. Yeah. I think it's very mixed. I think that hopefully we're going to get a lot of veterans to come out, but I think it's a mixed crowd. I think it's people who are curious, and to be honest with you, I'm not very sure. I would imagine it's people that are either connected to veterans in some way, people that would have a curiosity about this kind of thing, because it's not the same as going out to see, quote unquote, a play. It's you would have to have an interest in this.
The participants, did they all experience combat in some form, or
3 combat veterans and then 1 spouse, and the other 3 served but did not see combat.
When somebody goes overseas and they see combat, they leave behind friends, they leave behind family members, I'm sure, who are worried every moment that they're away when they're in Iraq or Afghanistan. They've got to be worried constantly about whether their loved one is going to return.
We have Shannon has a great story. The spouse, the wife of Scott Owens, Shannon Owens, has a great story about watching the news one night, and she saw him on the news. They were invading, I can't remember. Can you help me, Taylor? Do you know what he was invading? But she saw him walk across the screen on the news and then didn't hear from him. I mean, I think she says she got 6 letters, 3 emails, 2 phone calls the whole time he was over. And I can't even imagine, I think about, when my husband leaves for a weekend, how hard that is. I can't imagine, 9-month deployment, year deployment, 2 or 3 of those. It just has to be, as Shannon Owens says, pins and needles all the time.
Taylor, did you have people back home that you were close to that you left behind?
Yeah, my dad and my sister, but it's so much different with the families that I've seen, those that are leaving families behind, wives and kids, and I just can't even imagine what they go through on a daily basis. They are really the backbone of the military family, and without them, I don't know where we would be.
How important was it to have contact with them or get a package from them or a letter from them?
It was very important. I didn't have so much support like that while I was over there, but when I did get it, it's tremendous. All you think about is home over there and the little things about home and everything that you can't get. I remember thinking about these molasses cookies that I hadn't had in probably 20 years since I was a kid, and for whatever reason, they popped into my head on patrol, and it was this insatiable crave. But yeah, it's everything to get packages and letters from home.
Again, our phone number is 813-239-9663. Our email address is dj@wmnf.org. Dorothy writes this. She says, I was a PR person sent to Panama Canal, Nicaragua the week before it fell. More in Central and South America. I can only imagine how much worse it was for these young men now. There are too many coming home injured in body and mind. After their injuries, the advances in medicine have kept them alive, but at what price? So good that they're sharing their stories, and hopefully they'll be able to have a functioning life. I fear for them and their families. I hope this project helps. Please thank them for their service. That's Dorothy, who's listening online.
Thank you, Dorothy.
813-239-9663. Our email address is dj@wmnf.org. David writes this. Could your veteran talk about his take on the VA? I'm upset that the whistleblowers who are trying to improve things at the VA are constantly fired. So do you have any thoughts about the VA? Did you get good service?
It's such a touchy subject because I know it's not their fault. They're just inundated right now. They're completely overwhelmed. And I would say, half of my experiences there have been fine and no issues, and then the other half have been, not so good. The whole reason I went with civilian mental health care is because I was completely blown away by my treatment from the VA's mental health professionals. The way they talked to me, the way they acted, it just wasn't what I needed. It actually made things worse. But again, they're just so overwhelmed right now, and I think a lot of it has to do with that. They're forgetting that we are people and we are going through things that, they're terrible things, and we need help. And to be turned away or to be talked down to, there's definitely a lot of changes that need to be made.
Yeah, I have something to add to that. It's very interesting, so here I am, a civilian walking into this world, project director on this project, kind of trying to put the pieces together and recruit people. And so where's the first place I start is the VA. And when I contact the VAs, they were not allowed to put any posters up, anything non-governmental to get people involved in this project. They weren't allowed to talk to their population there. So I had to, I thought for me that was exactly where you go, and that was not where you go. And I wanted to mention that we're also making a documentary about this whole process with WEDU. And one of our early rehearsals, we started talking about the VA, and the documentary filmmakers were there, and we were all sort of sitting around chatting. And then when we stopped chatting, and some of it was not, it was much like what Taylor was talking about, but one of the veterans said to me, I feel really bad about talking about the VA like that. And so we had to kind of sit down again and say, if there's stuff that you don't want in here, we certainly will respect that. I don't want you guys to censor yourselves. But I think my takeaway from it, the overall tone was, we don't want to bite the hand that feeds you, sort of. We don't want to say bad things about the VA, but there's a struggle there, obviously. Don't want to say something bad, but at the same time not getting the help we need.
Mm-hmm. I imagine too that we were going years where we had smaller wars in the 80s and 90s. I mean, still serious wars, but then nothing to match the size of Iraq and Afghanistan. So that whatever support services the VA had in the 90s and early part of 2000s, mm-hmm. Everything changed when the soldiers began to come home from Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yes, because also the added thing, these IEDs now, there's a whole new crop of disorders with the traumatic brain injury. And I think that they just, are inundated with a lot of veterans that have traumatic brain injury or TBI, and they don't know. They don't have the resources to treat it.
Because the survival rates now are much better than they were during Vietnam, because they're able to get the injured soldiers back to the hospital more quickly.
Right. Yeah. But also because this added thing of all the traumatic brain injury, I think that the ongoing care is going to be much different. Some people, anyone with severe traumatic brain injury is going to need care probably for the rest of their lives.
And we're learning so much more about it. I mean, whether it's the military, and I hate to compare it to the NFL, but the concussions that we see in the NFL too.
Right.
Yeah. 813-239-9663. Dave's in Temple Terrace. Dave, you're on. What would you like to ask our guest?
Well, really, I just have a comment. You're talking about a place for vets to get together and just talk, and the first Sunday of each month, the Sacred Grounds Coffee House on Bush Boulevard here in Tampa has a Veterans Open Mic Night where vets can come in, they can read a poem they wrote, they can talk about any subject they wish, and it's just a good effort to reach out and get the vets back involved in society.
And Dave, what time does that get underway at Sacred Grounds?
I believe it's from 6 to 9 the first Sunday of each month. But you can Google Veterans Open Mic or Sacred Grounds Coffee House, and I think it'll pop right up on Google.
And Dave, do veterans run that? Do you know?
That I don't know. The Student Veterans Association at USF might be involved in some way. A lady I know there is the one that gave me the information about it, and I attended once, and it's pretty relaxed and open, and just, anything you want goes there.
And Dave, are you a veteran yourself?
I am not. I do serve on the Veteran Affairs Committee with the Temple Terrace Chamber of Commerce, and we're doing what we can to help vets get reemployed and do things along that line.
Well, Dave, thanks a lot. Thanks for that suggestion.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks for putting me on.
All right, good to hear from you. 813-239-9663. Our email address is dj@wmnf.org. Taylor, could I ask, what did you think of the people in the country in Iraq? What was your interaction like with the folks in Iraq?
It was mixed. Obviously there's the language barrier. So the majority of the people that we interacted with were Iraqi police, Iraqi army. And it was different. We live in different cultures. for a lot of them, I could see that drive and that motivation to want to do something about their country. But again, you have a lot that were growing up with this hatred for the Western states, and you could feel a lot of that through them as well. One of my guys that lost his leg in my vehicle, he was actually an Iraqi national who came over with his family during the war with Iran. And so we would put Lopez on his name tape so that they would think he was Mexican, and he'd overhear everything that they were saying when they didn't think we understood. And I can say that there was a lot of times where he was very, very angry at what was being said. So it's kind of a mixed bag. The civilians there, you can tell that they just want freedom. They want the ability to live their lives, and it's just a shame that obviously now with ISIS as well, they're just not really getting that opportunity at all.
Did you get much kind of cross-cultural training before you went over? Did they talk about you're going to a place that's quite different for this reason and that reason? Oh yeah, definitely. It's definitely part of your pre-deployment readiness. It's all about getting used to their culture and understanding what you're getting into, and even that doesn't prepare you. I mean, I remember our convoy up from Kuwait, and I've got my squad leader next to me. He's like, "First time in a third world country, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah," because I was just wide-eyed because it's just complete culture shock. But yeah, they do their best to prepare you for it and what to expect. And Lisa, is that part of I keep wanting to say performance, but performance doesn't quite sound like the right word, although they are performing in a sense.
They're performing, but I like to think of it as them just sharing their stories, in a sort of theatrical setting. And, I think it's really more, I know they're getting things out of it, but I think it's really more for the audience and what the audience is getting out of it. And
what about the interaction between the Americans and the Iraqis or the Afghans? Does that come up in the play?
It comes up a little bit, yep. I think there's a piece in Ryan's bit about it, and we've talked about it just when we're having conversation. I know Scott's got some stuff too, but in Ryan's piece, he talks about some of that interaction, and when we've been just having our discussions that aren't part of the performance, there have been a lot of stories told about that.
Yeah, I can say I was enlisted, so a lot of mine was kind of the grunt work, sit in the vehicle, manning the gun, doing all that. Ryan was a captain in the Army, so he has a lot of those kind of inner workings with the public, and he actually has one of the most powerful stories in the piece, in my opinion, about just that, interactions with locals.
All right, so people should come out and see it. Tomorrow night has a premiere at Studio 620.
And it's free. All the performances are free and open to the public.
Let's go back to the phones, and thanks to Frank Knox for being our phone producer today. Joe's in Port Richey. Joe, you're on. What's your question for our guests, Taylor Urruela and Lisa Powers?
Okay, I have a question for the vet. I'm a Vietnam veteran, 69, 70, and I one time worked for a corporation when the Twin Towers got hit, and everybody wanted to make Iraq a parking lot. When I had gone up to every individual, I said, "Are you willing to go?" And they said, "Hell no, let somebody else do it." Everybody wants an action, but they don't want to take part of the action. And I'm reading this book now, The Breach of Trust, by Andrew Basovich, that says only 1% of our population has served them in the military. It's disgusting, especially when a vet like your guest has to do 3 tours. I couldn't do 3 tours of Vietnam. We used to be 90 days in the jungle, 3 days in the rear. 90 days in the jungle, 3 days in the rear. I would like to know what the vet that you have as a guest thinks about that only 1% of our population has served, but yet they always are willing to have action somewhere, but the few do what the many don't want to do.
Well, first off, thank you very much for your service. It's people like you that led me to where I am today. It's the reason I joined. I would say that there's just a certain number of people that are able to do that, are able to get to the point where they can go to a foreign land and fight for it. And unfortunately, with freedom of speech, they're able to speak and talk however they choose. And I mean, for me, I really don't want somebody over there who isn't willing to be over there, who doesn't want to be over there. And so, unfortunately, if that is 1%, that's 1%. But I'd rather have guys like you and I, or men and women like you and I, who.
Well, myself, I'll be honest, not to cut you off. I was drafted. I didn't have freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I was drafted and sent to Vietnam. So, I mean, I look at you guys in high regard. I mean, I remember the World War II guys being down on us from Vietnam because we were getting all the news. I used to tell them, if you want the news, you can have it. Yeah. I mean, what you sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice, dead or alive, people will never understand what you go through. Even after you come home and you think you're okay, and you're not okay.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
Well, Joe, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, was there resentment, Taylor? I mean, if only 1% of the folks in the country have served in the military, and you're over there on the front lines in Afghanistan, you're doing in Iraq rather, doing some very dangerous things. Did the people that you worked with, or did you resent the folks back home at all?
No, not what I didn't. I can't speak for others, but as I said, I feel that there's a certain number of people who are able to do this, and it's just not right. You know, as we saw with Vietnam, some were drafted and ran with it and really stood and defended their country and went and did their job, and others just, they couldn't. And that's the thing. You can't put somebody that's unable to see those things into a situation like that. I feel as if I've come back stronger only because I was prepared for it, knowing that I could handle it, knowing that I wanted to go there and fight. I couldn't imagine somebody going over there and being forced to fight and not having the right mindset for it. I feel like those are the individuals that really come back with issues, and that's not their fault. You know, they were pushed and forced to be in that position. So for me, I welcome those that want and believe that they can go and do this, and for the rest, I mean, that there's nothing wrong with not serving. You know, I don't judge anyone based off of service.
Well, that's Taylor Urruela, who spent 6.5 years as an Army infantryman, including service in Iraq, where he was wounded by 2 roadside bombs, resulting in the loss of one of his legs below the knee. He is a participant in the Telling Tampa Bay project, which gets underway tomorrow night at Studio 620 in downtown St. Petersburg. And the director of Telling Tampa Bay is Lisa Powers. She's with us, too. Our phone number, 813-239-9663. Our email address, dj@wmnf.org. Nate's in Tampa. Nate, thank you for calling. What would you like to ask our guests?
Well, I'd like to say, first of all, I'd like to tell the gentleman thank you for your service.
Thanks a lot, Nate.
I come from a military family. I did not serve. All 5 of my mom's brothers did. They were Marines. One was in the Army. My cousin Tony is currently a Marine, and he's done 4 tours. And I asked him not too long ago, why did he keep going back? And this is someone who was a straight-A student. He kind of liked computers, and he looked at me and said, I'm better at killing people than I am working a 9 to 5. And I didn't know how to take it because he's my first cousin. We grew up together. We're only 2 days apart. But I understood. That comment made me understand exactly what you guys go through and the women go through. And I just want to say I fully support the military. And I teach my girls, my 3 daughters about the military. We do benefits. We do the charity runs. And God bless you guys. I really appreciate you. That's all I want to say.
God bless you, too. Thank you very much.
Nate, thank you. Thank you for your call. Let's go to James, who's driving. James, you're on WMNF. What would you like to say or ask our guests?
I'd like to. Well, I'll give you a little bit of background. I was actually in Mogadishu right after Black Hawk Down, and I was a civilian, and I was actually hired by a company to train the Somalis. So I had a lot of interaction with the local nationals. My question is, do you still feel that sometimes that there are only other people who've had similar experiences that understand what you're saying to them?
You're talking about from the civilian population?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm.
Yeah, I mean, one of my closest friends is a Vietnam vet, and it's he's the only, I can say specific sentences, and he's the only one who actually understands that whole concept.
Yeah, 100%, especially those that have served in some sort of contracting role over there, which I've known a lot as well. I mean, you're doing the same things and experiencing the same types of things as we did. I mean, they're nearly identical.
Well, I think probably I was a little bit different in the fact that I was in a compound and I actually got to meet the Somalis and I got to meet the local nationals, and I actually had a chance to work with them, which was really, they were actually, if you got them one-on-one, they were just awesome people. They were kind, they were generous, they were, just like us, to a sense. I mean, there were cultural differences, but, humans are humans.
Agreed.
The other thing I went through was that when I came back in '95, I tried to actually get treatment for PTSD, and up until about 3 years ago, I wasn't able to do that. So that was kind of a whole interesting experience for me.
And James, are you getting treatment now?
No, I finished that. I actually was in treatment for 3 years.
But you got some
EMDR.
All right. James, thank you. Thank you for your phone call.
You're welcome.
All right. Lisa, we're almost out of time. How can people see the staging of Telling Tampa Bay, the Telling Project?
Mm-hmm. Well, we have 5 performances, and these performances are brought to you through the Florida Humanities Council, which is an affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and they're bringing these performances to you for free. So that is a really great service that they're providing for our community. We open March 3rd at the studio at 6:20 in St. Petersburg at 7:30. March 6th at the Players in Sarasota at 7:30. March 13th and 14th at HCC Theater at the Ybor City campus at 7:30. And April 1st at Largo Cultural Center in Largo at 7:30. And you can go to floridahumanities.org and you can get all the information you need to about these performances.
And we'll post the link soon on our website. Well, Lisa Powers, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob.
Taylor Urruela, thank you very much. Thanks for coming by WMNF.
Thanks for having me.
You're listening to 88.5 FM. This is WMNF Tampa, St. Petersburg. If you want to comment about today's show, give us a call at 813-238-8001. Record your comment on extension 115. We'll play those comments tomorrow at 11 a.m. Stay tuned for the news coming up next. This is WMNF Tampa, St. Petersburg.